My dying father tried to leave me control of his estate, and my mother screamed that I wasn't his real daughter. My brother leaned back in his chair and said, "You were rescued. I was born into this family." Then Dad asked his attorney to open the sealed military file he had kept hidden for decades. Inside was the truth about my real parents, the promise he made to my father, and the DNA secret my mother thought he had never discovered. My name is Clara Vale. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I understood my place in the Vale family. I was loved by my father, tolerated by my mother, and resented by my older brother Grant. At least, that was how everyone described him. My brother, Dad's son, the heir everyone expected. My father, Thomas Vale, was not a warm man in the way people usually expect fathers to be warm. He didn't give long speeches. He didn't hug in public. He didn't say "I love you" every 5 minutes. But every morning when I was a child, he would tie my shoelaces himself before school, even though there were housekeepers who could have done it. Every birthday, he wrote me a short note on cream stationery and slipped it under my plate at breakfast. Every time my mother made me feel like a guest in my own home, he would knock once on my bedroom door and leave a cup of tea on the desk without asking me to explain. That was how my father loved. Quietly, consistently, without performance. He came from one of those old East Coast families whose name was on hospital wings, scholarship funds, and plaques in buildings nobody actually used anymore. Before he took over the family foundation and investment office, he had served in the military for more than 25 years and retired as a general. People still called him General Vale long after he came home. I knew I was adopted. No one ever hid that from me. The version I was told was simple. My biological parents died when I was very young, and Dad took me in because he had known my father in the service. That was all. No dramatic bedtime story. No framed letter. No detailed explanation. When I asked more as a teenager, Dad would only say, "Your father was one of the finest men I ever commanded." And then his eyes would go somewhere far away, and I would stop asking. My mother, Evelyn, had a different way of talking about my adoption. She never said anything cruel in front of Dad when I was little, but she had a talent for making kindness feel like debt. When I spilled juice on the rug at 9, she said, "Most children in your situation don't get rooms like this." When I cried because Grant ruined a drawing I made for Dad, she said, "You should be careful about acting spoiled. Gratitude is very becoming on girls like you." Girls like me? That phrase followed me through childhood like a stain. Grant was 3 years older than me, handsome in the effortless way rich boys often are, and completely certain that the world owed him a soft landing. He broke things and called them accidents. He insulted people and called it honesty. He borrowed money and called it an advance. My mother adored him. Dad did not. That was the first crack in the family that nobody liked to name. Dad paid for Grant's schools, his cars, his internships, his private tutors, and the 2 business ideas Grant abandoned before 30. But he never trusted him with responsibility. He made Grant work summers at the family office, then quietly removed him from projects after he missed meetings or embarrassed staff. He made him sit in on foundation reviews, then stopped inviting him after Grant called a veterans housing program bad optics. With me, Dad was different. He gave me boring work before he gave me important work. He made me read grant proposals until my eyes hurt. He asked me what I thought, then challenged every answer. He had me sit with the family office accountants and learn how trusts actually worked. He sent me to meetings with attorneys and told me to listen more than I spoke. By the time I was 28, I was working full-time as Director of Operations for the Vale Veterans Foundation. Grant called me Dad's little charity project. My mother called me over-involved. Dad called me prepared. The fight over the inheritance did not start when my father got sick. It started long before that, in little comments at dinner, in closed doors, in my mother's tight smile whenever Dad asked for my opinion instead of Grant's. But it exploded after Dad's diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer, late stage, aggressive. The doctor was careful with his words. Dad was not. "How long?" he asked. The doctor hesitated. Dad said, "Do not manage me. Answer me." 6 months, maybe 9 with treatment. Dad chose treatment, not because he thought it would save him, but because he said he had affairs to put in order. That was exactly how he said it. Not, I want more time. Not, I'm scared. Affairs to put in order. For 3 months, I drove him to appointments, managed his medications, sat with him when the nausea hit, and helped him review foundation files from the recliner in his study. My mother came in and out like a visitor at a hotel. Grant appeared when there were board members around, kissed Dad on the shoulder in front of people, and disappeared when Dad needed help standing. Then, one Tuesday morning, Dad told me to be at the family office at 10. Wear the navy suit, he said. I smiled because even dying, he still cared about presentation. Am I being inspected? I asked. Yes, he said, by people with bad manners and expensive watches. I thought it was a foundation meeting. It wasn't. When I walked into the conference room on the 31st floor of the Vale building, my mother was already seated at the head of the table. That alone made my stomach tighten. Dad's chair was at the opposite end, near the windows. He looked thin, almost swallowed by his dark suit, but his back was straight. His attorney, Mr. Alden, sat beside him with a leather folder and a tablet. 2 trustees were there. So was the family office director, a woman named Marcia, who had worked for Dad for 16 years. Grant stood by the coffee station in a charcoal suit, scrolling through his phone like he had already won something. My mother looked me up and down. Good, she said. You came. Not hello, not thank you for helping your father this morning, just, you came. I sat beside Dad, but my mother immediately said, Clara, sit over there. She pointed to the far side of the table away from him. Dad's eyes moved to her. His voice was weak but clear. She sits here. Nobody spoke for a second. I sat beside him. My mother folded her hands. Thomas, we all know this is difficult. That is why I asked everyone to come. We need to discuss a sensible transition before emotions make things complicated. Dad looked at Mr. Alden. This is not her meeting. My mother's face tightened. It is a family meeting. Grant finally put down his phone. Dad, come on. We're trying to help. You're sick. Nobody wants Clara making decisions just because she's been hovering around you. I felt that in my chest. Hovering. That was what they called driving him to chemo, changing his sheets, organizing his pills, and sitting beside him while he pretended not to be afraid. Dad said, Clara has been doing the work. Grant laughed once. Work? She runs donation events and reads sad letters for a living. I saw Marcia look down at the table. My mother gave a soft, wounded sigh. This is exactly the problem. You have allowed her to believe she is equal to your real family. The room went still. Dad's hand rested on the table. I saw his fingers curl slightly. My mother turned to me. Clara, I know this will hurt your feelings, but it needs to be said plainly. You are not Thomas's biological child. You were taken in after a tragedy. We honored that. We gave you a home, an education, a name. But gratitude has limits. You cannot expect to inherit control over a family legacy that is not yours by blood. My throat went tight, but I did not answer. Because part of me, the small part she had trained so well, still felt like maybe she was right. Grant smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to let me know he was enjoying it. You should have accepted the foundation role and stayed in your lane, he said. But you pushed too hard. You made Dad think you were the only person he could trust. I didn't make Dad think anything, I said. My mother's eyes sharpened. Do not talk back to me in this room. I looked at Dad. His face was pale, but his eyes were fixed on her with a coldness I had never seen directed at anyone in our family. Mr. Alden opened his folder. Mrs. Vale, General Vale called this meeting to execute a transfer of operational control over certain trust and foundation responsibilities. Yes, my mother said quickly, and we are prepared to discuss a better structure. She slid a packet across the table toward me. I did not touch it. What is that? I asked. Grant answered. A release. You resign from the foundation, waive any claim to future control of the estate, accept a generous settlement, and stop making this harder than it needs to be. My ears rang. A settlement. Like I was a lawsuit. My mother's voice softened into something almost kind, which somehow made it worse. You will be comfortable, Clara. Nobody is throwing you into the street. But Grant is Thomas's son. He carries the Vale bloodline. The board, the family office, the foundation, the estate, all of that should pass through him. Dad coughed, a harsh, dry sound that made me reach for his water. My mother kept talking. I have spent years watching you confuse your father's guilt with entitlement. He felt responsible for what happened to your parents. That does not make you his heir. I turned to her. What happened to my parents? She blinked. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Dad put his hand over mine before I could say anything else. Then Grant leaned forward. You were rescued, he said. I was born into this family. Don't make everyone pretend that doesn't matter. There are sentences that do not just hurt. They organize every insult you have ever swallowed and hand them back to you with a label. You were rescued. I was born. I looked at the release packet. For 1 weak second, I almost wanted to sign it. Not because I thought they deserved anything, but because Dad looked so tired, and I hated that my existence had become one more battle at the end of his life. Then Dad said, Alden. Mr. Alden turned to him. Yes, sir. The sealed file. My mother went completely still, not confused, not curious, still, like someone had placed a hand around her throat. Grant frowned. What sealed file? Dad did not look at him. He looked at my mother. You chose the word blood, he said. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. My mother whispered, Thomas, don't. Dad said, open it. Mr. Alden removed a second folder from his briefcase. It was dark blue, bound with a red seal and a paper label that read, V-17/personal command file/authorized release. I had never seen it before. Mr. Alden broke the seal. My mother stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. This is inappropriate, she said. He is medicated. He is not thinking clearly. Marcia spoke for the first time. General Vale completed a capacity evaluation last Thursday. I was present for the video recording. My mother turned on her. You had no right, Dad said. She had my order. Nobody moved after that. Mr. Alden placed the first document on the table. This is the adoption petition for Clara Elena Vale, formerly Clara Elena Reyes, he said, filed and granted when she was 14 months old. Reyes. The name hit me strangely. Like a word I should have known but had somehow misplaced. He placed down another document. This is the death certificate for Elena Reyes, Clara's biological mother. She died from complications following childbirth. My hand flew to my mouth. I knew my parents had died. I had never known my mother died bringing me into the world. Mr. Alden's voice remained careful. This is the service record of Captain Daniel Reyes, Clara's biological father. He served under General Vale's command. Dad's hand squeezed mine. Mr. Alden continued. Captain Reyes was killed during a classified support operation 6 months after his wife's death. Before deployment, he named General Vale as emergency guardian for his daughter if no biological family was able to take custody. I could not breathe normally. The room, the glass walls, the city below us, everything blurred except Dad's hand over mine. Mr. Alden placed a photocopy of a handwritten letter in front of me. This letter was written by Captain Reyes to General Vale before his final assignment. I stared at the handwriting. Sir, if I do not come back, I am asking you for the only thing I have no right to ask. Please make sure Clara is not alone. Elena died giving her life. I may die doing my duty. I know you are not a sentimental man, but you are a good one. If my daughter must grow up without us, let her grow up protected by someone honorable. I covered my mouth and cried without making a sound. Dad had never told me that. All those years, he had carried that promise like a private burden, not to make me grateful, not to make me feel indebted, just because he had made it. My mother sat down slowly. Grant looked irritated more than moved. So what? He said. It's sad. Nobody is saying it isn't sad, but that doesn't make her blood. Dad turned his head toward him. Grant should have stopped talking. He didn't. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. You felt guilty because her father died under you. Fine. You did a good thing, but I'm your son. My mother closed her eyes. That was when I saw it. Fear. Not anger. Fear. Mr. Alden looked at Dad. Dad gave one small nod. Mr. Alden placed the next page on the table. This is a medical fertility report for General Thomas Vale, dated 34 years ago. Grant's face changed. My mother said, Thomas. Dad did not blink. Mr. Alden continued. The report concluded that General Vale was biologically unable to father children. This diagnosis predates his marriage to Mrs. Vale. The silence that followed was not normal silence. It had weight. Grant laughed, but it came out wrong. That's ridiculous. Mr. Alden placed another document down. This is a paternity report commissioned privately, 29 years ago. It excludes General Vale as Grant's biological father. Grant stared at the paper. Then he looked at my mother. She did not look back at him. For the first time in my entire life, my brother looked like a child. "What is this?" he said. My mother's mouth moved, but nothing came out. Dad's voice was rough. "The truth." Grant stood so fast his chair tipped backward. No, this is fake." "Mr. Alden said, the records were authenticated and retained under attorney-client privilege. General Vale instructed that they remain sealed unless Mrs. Vale or Grant attempted to challenge Clara's status using biological inheritance claims. My mother's face crumpled into rage. "You promised," she hissed at Dad. Dad looked exhausted, not ashamed, not cruel, just done. "I protected your secret for 26 years, he said. "I let the world believe what you needed it to believe. I let him carry my name. I gave him every chance to become worthy of it." Grant flinched. Then Dad looked at me. "But I will not let you use blood to destroy the only child who ever honored my name." I broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just folded over myself, trying to hold in something too big for my body. My whole life, I had thought I was the weak spot in the family tree. The exception. The charity case. The girl everyone had been generous enough to include. But Dad had known everything. He had known I was not his blood. He had known Grant was not his blood either, and somehow he had never made either of us pay for the truth. My mother recovered first because people like her always do. "You are being vindictive," she said. "You are dying, and instead of preserving this family, you are humiliating me." Dad answered, "No, you did that." Grant grabbed the paternity report and scanned it like the words might rearrange themselves if he stared hard enough. Then he turned on me. "You knew?" I stared at him. "I found out when you did." "Don't act innocent," he snapped. "This is exactly what you wanted." That was when something inside me settled. For years I had defended myself against accusations I could never quite disprove. Greedy, ungrateful, manipulative, too close to Dad, too involved in the foundation, too eager to belong. But in that room, surrounded by legal documents, medical records, and the family betrayal my mother had hidden under pearls and charity luncheons, I finally understood something. They had never hated me because I was taking too much. They hated me because Dad gave me what they could not force from him. Trust. Mr. Alden turned to the next section. General Vale's trust amendment is active as of today. Clara Vale will assume management authority over the Vale Veterans Foundation, the Family Office Oversight Committee, and all estate matters related to General Vale's care and posthumous instructions. My mother said, "I contest that." Mr. Alden nodded once, as if he expected it. The amendment includes a no-contest provision. Any beneficiary who challenges Clara's appointment on the basis of adoption, blood status, or alleged undue influence forfeits discretionary distributions beyond the fixed amount already assigned. Grant's voice cracked. "Fixed amount?" Mr. Alden looked at him. "You will receive the education and housing trust General Vale established years ago. You will not receive voting control, foundation authority, or access to operating assets." Grant looked at Dad with pure disbelief. "After everything? You're choosing her?" Dad's answer was immediate. "I chose character." My mother made a sound like she had been slapped. Grant pointed at me. "She's not even yours." And Dad closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "She became mine every day she showed up." That was the line that ended the meeting. Not legally. Legally, there were signatures, witness statements, recorded confirmations, and formal acknowledgments. Mr. Alden was careful. Marcia was precise. The trustees asked questions in stiff voices and avoided looking at my mother. But emotionally, it ended there. My mother's favorite weapon had turned in her hand. Blood. She had used it against me for years. She had built a whole throne for Grant on top of it. And Dad had known that throne was empty. In the weeks that followed, My mother tried everything except accountability. First, she said Dad had been manipulated by me. Then she said the medication had made him cruel. Then she told Grant that the paternity report did not change their bond, while also refusing to tell him who his biological father was. Grant spiraled. He called me 12 times in one night, leaving voicemails that swung from rage to begging. "You ruined my life. Did he ever love me? You don't even need all of it. Tell Alden I should still be on the board." I did not answer. Not because I hated him, because for the first time in my life, I understood that not every wound was mine to dress. My father lived 7 more weeks. During that time, my mother was allowed to visit, but she was no longer allowed to control his medical decisions. Grant came twice. The first time, he stood in the doorway and cried without speaking. The second time, he asked Dad if he had always hated him. Dad's answer was quiet. "No, I hated what your mother made me pretend. I did not hate you." I do not know if that helped Grant. Maybe it did. Maybe nothing could have helped him then. My last private conversation with Dad happened on a rainy afternoon when the room smelled like antiseptic and the tea he could barely drink. I asked him the question that had been sitting in my chest since the meeting. "Why didn't you tell me about my parents?" He stared at the window for a long time. "Because I did not want your life to begin with a debt," he said. I cried immediately. He hated that. "Don't leak," he muttered. I laughed through it, which made him almost smile. He continued slowly. "Your father was brave. Your mother was loved. You were not abandoned. I should have told you sooner." "You kept his promise," I said. Dad looked at me. "No," he said. "At first I kept a promise. Then I raised my daughter." Those were the last words he said to me that felt fully like him. After he passed, there was no dramatic will reading where everyone gasped around a mahogany table. The important part had already happened while he was alive, while he could still choose, still speak, still look my mother in the eye and refuse to let her rewrite our family one last time. The estate process was ugly, but not explosive. My mother filed one objection, then withdrew it when Mr. Alden reminded her of the no contest clause. Her allowance remained intact, but her authority was gone. She kept the house she lived in, but she could not sell family property, remove foundation assets, or appoint Grant to anything. Grant lost his office at the family foundation, though calling it an office was generous. He had mostly used it to store golf clubs and avoid accountability. He received enough to live comfortably if he behaved responsibly, which to him felt like poverty because it came without power. I stayed. Not in the family house. I could not breathe there anymore. I moved into a smaller place 10 minutes from the foundation office and got to work. The first thing I did as trustee was create the Vale Scholarship for children of service members who died in the line of duty. I used both names because I finally understood that I did not have to choose between where I came from and who raised me. At the opening ceremony, I placed 2 photographs on the table. One of Captain Daniel Reyes in uniform, young and serious, standing beside the man who would become my father. One of General Thomas Vale holding me as a toddler, looking uncomfortable and protective at the same time. For years, I thought my inheritance story was about proving I deserved a place in a family that had never fully wanted me. I was wrong. It was never about proving anything to my mother. It was never about beating Grant. It was never about a stolen inheritance, a secret will, or a revenge story where everyone got exactly what they deserved. It was about learning that my father had given me something more permanent than money. He gave me the truth. He gave me his name. He gave me the chance to stop begging a toxic family to love me correctly. And in the end, the karma was not that my mother was exposed, or that Grant lost the power he thought he was born to inherit. The real karma was that Dad got to choose while he was still alive. He got to look at the woman who betrayed him, the son who mocked me, and the daughter everyone called Charity, and make one thing clear. Blood may explain where you begin. It does not decide who becomes family. So tell me honestly, if you were in my place, would you have exposed the DNA secret in that room, or kept it buried to protect the family name? And after everything my mother did, would you ever forgive her, or would you keep the boundary exactly where Dad left it? Thank you for watching until the very end. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more inheritance stories, revenge stories, family betrayal, Toxic family drama, stolen inheritance twists, and satisfying karma endings. See you in the next story.